Let's go to the Raiders then, which you were there
Mhm.
relatively recently, and I'm gonna just start this out by telling you what I've heard, right? Like, which is, this is probably the best way to illustrate like what I've heard. This one anecdote that I've got from when Ben Johnson was going to interview there. Now, and people might have heard me tell this story in the podcast before, but I know, a couple months ago when Ben Johnson was deciding what he wanted to do. He and his agent sat down and they talked about like, okay, like we don't need to go interview with everybody anymore. And if we're going to go interview in a place, we're going to do it in a place where we think we would actually take the job. We're not going to just interview to interview.
Right.
So there were a few teams where they looked at it and said, we're not going to interview there. And they called those teams ahead of time. Okay. And they called those teams ahead of time saying like, look, we don't want to embarrass you by shooting down the interview. And we don't want to look like jerks. So just don't put in a slip for me, right? And everybody moves on, no harm, no foul.
Mm-hmm.
So the Raiders put one in anyway, even though they were told, like, he's not taking this job. So there was a discussion with someone at the Raiders where person of the Raiders says, well, hold on a second, wait a second. Like before you say anything, before you get mad about this, let me put you in touch with Tom Brady. And so Brady called and they had a conversation. I think it went like an hour and a half, whatever it was, something like that. And Brady basically explained that the organization was not going to be the same anymore. And that like everything that you'd heard about the Raiders was about to change. And they had these big money people coming in. And guys like Egan Durbin, who's the CEO of Silver Lake, Tom's own business partner, Tom Wagner, just these big money guys that were going to provide resources, and that Tom wasn't going to put something on his name on that Tom wasn't going to put his name on something that was not of the highest caliber, was the reality of it. I don't know how much you've talked with Tom about this, if at all. But let's just start there. Like, what sort of change do you think Tom can affect in the Raiders organization, and how do you see him as an executive? I know he's not going to be there every day.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, his family's in Florida, and so he's going to be remote with a lot of this stuff. But just knowing Tom the way that you do, what sort of effect do you think he's going to have as an executive?
Well, remember we were just talking about a standard. We were talking about with Stafford, like this guy's got the standard of all standards. And so, as to your point, he's not going to get involved in something, especially something he's so well informed on, has lived through all of those things, unless he has a vision for it and putting the right people in place and having the proper support and backing. And so, I would never count Tom Brady out in anything. And I think you're going to see, like you just mentioned, I didn't know that story, but I'm sure Ben Johnson walked away from having a conversation with that guy and being like, man, I know I said I wasn't going to go here, but I really got to think about this, because I think, look, Tom knows what it takes to win at every level of inside that building. He knows how the food staff should be, how the training room should be, how the media people should be. He's experienced it not just in one place, but then took that culture with him and basically injected it into Tampa Bay and won a Super Bowl in his first year. And you go back to Stafford, one crazy play by Stafford away from going back the next year, right? I mean, what was it? The fourth down play, hits the long bomb down the middle of the field. Or else, I mean, Brady, Tom's probably going to another Super Bowl with Tampa Bay. And so he's not going to get involved in something and just for name's sake and say, well, yeah, I have part ownership. We'll see what happens. Like, he's going to be involved. He's going to make sure that the right people are in place. And so even, like we just talked about with Stafford, when you find out that he's having conversations with Matt, I'm sure for Matt, that probably was very hard to sit there and say, man, if Brady wants me to go there and he's telling me these things, like, but as I got to this point, we were just talking about, like, how do you make that decision? It's not just Tom Brady. Like, your wife is helping make that decision. Your kids are helping make it. So I'm sure for Matt's family, maybe it was easy for him to stay in LA. But I think you're going to see, and especially the more time goes, the Brady effect will take a place in Vegas, and he is going to do what it takes to build a winner.
Is there something you think he'll value in quarterbacks? We can go through who. I assume for a lot of the reasons you just laid out, like maybe Aaron Rodgers would be the guy,
Yeah.
But like if you look at like what he showed you in your time working with him, what do you think when he's helping them with their quarterback evaluations? What do you think is going to be like at the top of the list and what he's looking for?
It's got to be number one, in my opinion. It's got to be toughness, work ethic, leadership, all of those things, which is why you're probably going to see him initially go, obviously make a play for Stafford, possibly for Rodgers, a guy that he knows can come in and settle the ship until he can find the young guy that really they believe in to really kind of bring in, groom, maybe learn from one of these guys. But I think for me, Tom has such a unique view, and hearing him, do announcing this year, you can just hear it from the way he talks about the game, the standard that he has for the quarterback position. And so when you talk, he's like, I see a lot of bad quarterback play. Guys, they see a blitz come in, they run the run right into it. So there's a big mental aspect that's probably going to go into that. And I'm sure any quarterback that's going to be brought in to be considered to be a quarterback with the Raiders at some point is going to sit down with Tom Brady, and he's going to go over things and say, okay, it's third down and here comes the weak safety blitz. How are you going to handle that? Are you just going to run the play and say, man, I hope I can extend the play with my legs and make a play? Or am I going to have a thought process? And I'm sure he's going to have the same conversations with Chip Kelly, and he's going to be very involved just because that's what he's passionate about and that's what he believes in.
Do you think, like, to some degree, is it going to be hard for him? Because I remember hearing like this about Michael Jordan. You know what I mean? Like, where Michael Jordan's standard was so high that it was like he would be a terrible coach because like he just would expect too much out of everybody. Do you think to some degree, like, Tom's going to have to adjust that a little bit because his standard is so ridiculous that, like, it's almost like one of those, like, hey, Tom, like, not everybody can do what you can. You know what I mean? Like, do you think there's going to be some, I don't know, some adjustment that he would have to go through in assessing quarterbacks,
It's funny. I've watched, obviously I grew up, I was in Cleveland, but I was still a Michael Jordan fan. So I've watched a lot of the documentaries, and you see like a lot of similarities between the two. But I would say the one thing, having been around Tom, is his ability to empathize and relate to people of all different walks of life, all different positions. I mean, that's to me what made him so great. He knew which guys he could push, like Julian Edelman. He would drive Julian nuts. If Julian was supposed to run the route at 10 yards and he ran it at 9.5, he'd be all over his ass. But if there was someone else that he knew that he wouldn't be able to kind of do it that way, he kind of put his arm around him and say, hey, babe, like, I'm expecting you to do this. And so his ability to have a high standard, but bridge that gap. And literally, like, I used to give him shit. Like, what are you, 45? And here you are, you're listening to Kendrick and the Drake and like his ability to relate to, because ultimately he's got to be the most humble athlete, greatest athlete of all time. And so I think because he has that humility, he's able to relate. And when you watch the Jordan like Tom Brady was never going to go punch Steve Kerr in the face. That just wasn't his MO. He might get in a little bit of a banter we've heard with Vrabel or Rodney or whatever.
Yeah.
But deep down, he genuinely cared about those people. And that was, it's so unique of a style of leadership. So I get what you're saying. Like, he has such a high standard, but he's going to find people that he believes can meet that standard.
It's kind of funny too, because like I remember, I did a story with Mahomes over the summer, and I really think like this is something that Mahomes and Burrow and Allen have, Lamar, I think too, where their superpower is sort of that they're able to remain regular guys despite all the money and fame and everything else that they've accumulated. And I think, in a lot of ways, Tom's the model for that. Like, it's the old, like, hi, I'm Tom. Yeah, I know who you fucking are.
Same thing I got,
You know what I mean? So,
but it's genuine. It's not, that's the thing. And it's funny. You mentioned those guys, and I have a lot of respect for Patrick and Joe and Lamar and Josh. And right now my son happens to be a really big Josh Allen fan.
Mm-hmm.
And so when they came to play this last game, I got him on the field, and Josh sat there and talked to him for 5 minutes about playing quarterback and throwing. And to me, that was so like, it was like watching the way Brady was. And that's being a good person goes a long way, especially when you're supposed to be the leader of this team. If you can be that type of example, everyone's going to love you. And that's what you want ultimately. And that's why, like, I don't think you could ever probably find someone.
When your best player is that, then it's just, that's exactly.
And so that's like, we're talking about
exactly what you're looking. It's like, I remember Bill saying this to me, like, when I asked about Tom, I was like, well, what does it mean for you when your best player is your hardest worker and your best guy? He just looked at me and said, like, it's exactly what you're looking for.
Yeah. And that's the one thing when we talk about evaluating quarterbacks in the draft, which I know we're going to do, like, how do you evaluate that? How do
Yeah.
you got to have people when you're going through these meetings with them at the combine, or you're bringing them in for your 30 visit or whatever it might be. The football is the football. How do you find those intangible factors, which obviously if you're someone who has those intangibles and you're bringing people in, you're going to be a part of that meeting and say, man, I see a lot of those qualities in this kid. Let's dig deeper on him.
Yeah, I had a moment like that with Josh too, where I had him on a Zoom over in September or whatever, and my son's in his second year playing tackle, and he and two of his buddies were here, and like I said to him at the end of the conversation, hey, like my son and his friends are playing video games over there, but they're so excited that I'm on a Zoom with you, and he told me to bring them over, and
Yeah.
they came over and they got in the Zoom, and their eyes were like like
Yeah.
pizzas, you know what I mean?
Oh
Like, oh my
yeah.
god, there's Josh Allen. He's awesome with that.
This basketball season, when your favorite stars score buckets, we're alley-ooping you an opportunity to win money from watching sports with Underdog. Do you want to win up to 1,000 times your money? You can with Underdog. To play, choose whether a player will go higher or lower on one of their stats, like points, assists, rebounds, and more. You can play with as little as $1, and if you get everything right, win up to 1,000 times your money. Turn $1 into 1,000 just with your hoops knowledge. This week on Underdog, I'm looking at Luka Doncic and the Lakers, higher than 20 points. Rudy Gobert and the Timberwolves, lower than 10 rebounds. Download the Underdog app and sign up now using promo code MMQB to unlock a special offer of up to $1,000 in bonus cash when you make your first deposit. Join in on the fun when you sign up with promo code MMQB and claim your special offer today. Get up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly upon first deposit. You must be 18 years or older, 19 years or older in Alabama or Nebraska, 19 years plus in Colorado for some games, 21 plus in Massachusetts and Arizona, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply, void in Colorado. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit ncpgambling.org. In Arizona, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342. In New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY.
Let me ask you this, because I do think that there's been a little buzz about Sam Darnold going there.
Yeah.
How would you feel about Sam Darnold's fit based on everything that he's been through, based on who he was last year for the Vikings, based on what Chip Kelly does offensively, what Pete Carroll is going to build from a program standpoint? Because I do think, like, I look at someone like Sam, and he's sustained so many scars, and
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if, like, going to a place like Vegas, I wonder if the fit would be there. You know what I mean? Like, and maybe that's the sort of place where he could take off because it's an offense that'll get him playing fast. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And
Look, I couldn't be happier for a guy than Sam Darnold. I not the same journey, but a guy who had to go from place to place and finally found what I would call a fertile garden. We talk about it a lot. Like, to me, if I'm Sam, I'm being very wary of leaving Minnesota.
yeah,
Because you've had this journey, right? First round pick, highly regarded, doesn't work out. Go to Carolina. I mean, how crazy is that photo of him and Baker
I
in
know.
the Carolina
Yeah,
jerseys? And you're thinking to myself, well, these were two of the top guys in the league, and they couldn't
yep,
even, So to me, as a quarterback, and this is something I experienced, finding the right fit is a big part of your success. And
yeah,
so I think having that year to kind of take a step back, go to San Francisco, learn from Kyle, learn that system, kind of refresh your perspective on your career, and then
yep,
go to Minnesota, where there wasn't really a lot of expectation. JJ McCarthy, a lot of people were saying was going to be the starter, and then be afforded that opportunity and go out and just ball out. And I know everyone wants to dwell on the last two games of the season. I mean, they couldn't block for more than 1 second in the playoff game. So
yep,
I mean, as a quarterback, that's a tough day. So I'm not gonna relegate his success away from just those one or two games at the end of the year. And I think he should be very selective about the opportunities. Look, I don't know what Minnesota's plans are. You would know better than me, but I got to imagine that's a little scary to say, good luck, Sam. Thanks for everything you've done. We're going to put the hands of our team, which we think is a Super Bowl
yeah.
quality team,
That's the
into
thing.
a rookie who tore his meniscus And we don't, I mean, if you go from what you did last year and you move on to JJ McCarthy and you win 8 games, is that, how do
Well,
you,
and it's hard to like, I mean, and I've made this point too. Like, I think if you got a 14 win team
yeah,
and you've got veteran players who like, they don't care about your 3 or 4 year plan. You know what I mean?
no,
Like,
they care about this year.
you think Justin Jefferson and Jonathan Grenard and Andrew Van Ginkel and
Mm-hmm.
TJ Hawkinson and Jordan Addison, do you think they care about your 3 or 4 year plan? No. Like, they
Right.
want to win right now. Like I think that's an important nuance to the whole thing, because it's like, I think if you're in a different spot, if you're a rebuilding team and you're really young, I almost think you owe it to the veterans to do everything you can to fortify yourself at the position, and that's the point I've tried to make. I think it's an important one, if you're the Vikings, like,
Mm-hmm.
it's like you have to be able, and Kevin's done such a great job there, but I think you do have to kind of be there. And I know you were with Kevin in New England, right? Like all the way back when he was playing. And I think that's something Kevin's done really well is he understands his locker room, and he's like, I think he's very cognizant of the way everything affects the next thing. And I do wonder if there's that part of it for him where it's like, I owe it to the veterans on this team to give them both Sam and JJ. You know what I mean? Let's see what happens.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting. I mean, that's obviously, you mentioned the Stafford domino. The next big one's got to be what happens with Darnold, right? Because if I'm Sam and I'm looking at the potential places to go, and I haven't. You would know a lot of this better than me, but Vegas seems pretty intriguing. You got a very good veteran head coach in Pete Carroll. You got an offensive guru when it comes to Chip Kelly, and I think they have some pieces to build around, but nothing's going to be Justin Jefferson and Addison and Hawkinson, and you're not going to go to a place that has something like that. Right. And so if I'm him, I'm kind of thinking like, how much money is it worth for me to leave a place where I finally found the player that I believe that I could be?
Yep.
That's the tough. And, for me, this is, having been in this situation as a free agent, this is an anxious time, an exciting time. You're starting to hear like, hey, this team's going to be interested. This team could be interested. Here's, and then you get to the tampering period. Here's the actual numbers. And I remember my wife being like, so what do you think? Where are we living? And so like, there's a lot that goes into these decisions. And so to me, Sam Darnold, if he has a chance to stay in Minnesota where they take care of him, I'm not saying like it's some low ball contract, but it's a good deal. Like I'd be hard pressed to move on from there.
Sure. And it's interesting too, because I am fascinated by these by these reclamation project stories that we've seen the last couple of years, and I think about like the conversation I had with a Seahawks coach. I was walking off the field with him at camp, and he was talking about the impact that coaching Geno had on him. And he said like, he's like, it really makes me kind of reevaluate how I look at the quarterback position and how many of these guys were just sort of screwed by their circumstances when they were younger. You know what I mean? Like, it just weren't in the right spot. And, maybe you get drafted and then the next year your coach is fired and your GM's fired. And now the people coming in have no investment in you. And like, now, and then all of a sudden now you're not on the team anymore 2 years later. And now you've been on 3 teams in 5 years. And like your wiring gets messed up,
You're preaching to the choir here, man.
But you know what I mean? Like, this coach said to me, he's like, it's really made me like wonder like how many Geno Smiths there are out there, how many guys who had talent and ability that were just sort of forgotten, that may be really good players now because of the circumstances, because they have those scars, because they had to go through everything they had to go through. I just think it's an interesting topic when you see that. You see what Baker's done in Tampa. You see what Sam did last year in Minnesota. I mean, there got to be more guys out there like that. Maybe that becomes Daniel Jones. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, look, it is true, and I think look, playing quarterback is the hardest position in all of sports, and if you don't have the right situation around you, the proper support around you, the other teams are too good. And we're so quick to move on from people. And so the fact that you could even have a photo where you have Baker Mayfield, who's the number 1 pick, you have Sam Darnold, what was he, like the 4th or 5th pick? And here they are, and they couldn't make it happen in Carolina. I mean, that's more about the place than those guys, right? I mean, they've gone on to prove that they're more than capable of being great starting quarterbacks. I mean, Sam Darnold was like in the top 5 in touchdown passes and yards this year. So it is pretty interesting when you look at that. Like, how many guys get to go to that situation right off the bat. I mean,
Yeah.
Josh Allen, Mahomes, Burrow. I mean, some of those guys get and they work their way up to it, right?
Here's an interesting fact. Lamar falls to 32, goes to a playoff team.
Right.
Mahomes goes to Kansas City. Kansas City traded way up. They made the playoffs the year before they drafted him. Buffalo, same thing. They made the playoffs in Sean McDermott's first year. They trade up for Josh Allen. So 3 of those 4 guys that were putting up on that tier went to teams that made the playoffs the year before, which doesn't seem like I mean, maybe, and look, those guys are great players and maybe they would have made it anyway, but like, I don't think it's irrelevant to their development.